The Bolt has been a long time coming. It was teased back in August 21 and will be the first mouse from Fnatic since the Clutch 2 back in 2019. It's lightweight, wireless, doesn't look like an airsoft golf ball, and the shape absolutely has the potential to be some people's endgame mouse. But there's just one thing that stopped it from being mine. Fnatic have been quietly killing the game with their recent releases. The $20 Focus 3 mousepad punched way above its weight, and the Streak 65 LP showed me that gaming keyboards don't always have to sound like a cheap set of maracas. The good news is that on paper at least, the Bolt doesn't end this run, and it's got everything that you'd want from a gaming mouse in 2022. It uses the Pixar 3370 sensor, weighs in at just 67 grams, offers 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, uses KLGM 8.0 switches, has over 100 hours of battery life that can be fast charged via USB-C, and is priced at only $80 or your local equivalent. In the box you will get the mouse, obviously, the USB receiver, a USB extender dongle, a charging cable, and an extra set of mouse skates. It's also mostly card except one bit of plastic that the mouse is placed on. I'd like to see that removed in the future so I don't have the emotional guilt of polluting our planet's oceans when I'm looking to do some serious gaming.
How dare you!
Everything here feels generally high quality. The USB charging cord is soft enough to play with, but it has a large plastic trident on the end of it which adds noticeable weight to the front of the mouse. I'd probably suggest taking a break and giving it 10 minutes of fast charging rather than trying to play with it plugged in, as this is quite distracting. I'm pleased that Fnatic have joined the dozens of us in the anti-hole movement and instead have opted for a solid shell mouse design. I have the white design which sports an attractive mottled coating that had plenty of grip and was rigid enough to have no side flex or creaking on my copy. The closest mouse I have to the finish of the shell is the Razer Viper, but somehow Fnatic have managed to make it even stickier and more porous. It made the mouse super easy to secure when fingertipping or clawing without the need for any additional grip tape. I did notice that the shell is a multi-part assembly rather than a single mold design as we see on Vaxi mice for example. I do worry that with this much texture on the coating and the multi-part assembly that it won't look white and pristine for long if you're the type of gamer who reaches for a bag of Cheetos between rounds. The KLGM 8.0 used in Mouse 1 and 2 are quickly becoming the first choice for gaming mice in place of Omron 20s. As a result, they are starting to feel a bit less standout and a bit more standard, but that doesn't necessarily make them any worse with them feeling responsive and tactile in game. The clicks themselves are quite thin, but they do have subtle comfort grooves to make sure your fingers stay in position. If I'm honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the visual design on the front, with the gap between the clicks kind of reminding me of a Faces of Meth mugshot, but that is to taste and there was no side play whatsoever on the clicks, so functionally they were perfect. My review unit did have a little pre-travel, but I'm told that this has been resolved in the final retail copies, so certainly one to watch out for. The scroll wheel legitimately surprised me. It's one of the best I've tried in recent memory. It's low to the shell, quiet, and has clearly defined tactile steps without being too difficult to actuate. Thankfully, it's also the only RGB you'll find on the mouse and has a discreet Flash Gordon logo. The Bolt uses two large PTFE skates which have a unique layout and feel thick, well-rounded and smooth without being too slick. Kind of similar to Hyperglides or core pads in appearance, sharing the same translucent texture, and I can't see any real benefit to buying aftermarket PTFE, especially as they include a spare pair of skates in the box. In terms of general shape, the mouse is a small to medium size. To use mice people are familiar with, it's somewhere between a Razer Viper Mini and a Razer Viper Ultimate, with a length somewhere close to the Mini and a grip width somewhere close to the Ultimate. It also shares the same inward curves of the Viper, reducing the grip width and making the shape work for people with smaller width hands. Where it differs from the Viper is the exaggerated rear bias hump, which kind of was reminiscent of an endgame gear XM1R. The hump placement means that despite this mouse being on the smaller side, it should support not only fingertip, but also claw and even palm players, assuming you don't have hands like an NBA starter. Front of the mouse was an interesting shape, being snubbed and squared off, and it's not something I've seen in other mice. The shorter front coupled with the lower click height gave this mouse a feeling of being under my hand more than in my hand, which I think played a factor in this mouse feeling lighter to micro adjust, with the weight being distributed less towards the outer radius of the finger movement. The Fnatic OP software is basic but serviceable, letting you change important features like DPI, lift-off distance, pole rate, debounce time, and RGB features. In terms of gameplay, I was skeptical about what this mouse was going to deliver because, being honest, I didn't think it was going to be able to do anything that I couldn't already get from another mouse on the market. I found, however, that I was able to perform really consistently with this mouse, despite not being able to put my finger on or point to one specific thing that made that possible. It's not the flashiest mouse, the lightest mouse, it doesn't have a killer feature, and to be honest, I'm not even the biggest fan of its appearance. But the more time I spent using it, my performance quickly drowned out these complaints, and I found myself becoming quite fond of the Bolt. It has an almost plucky underdog energy to it, especially when you compare it to mice from some of the other giant brands that dominate the market. After a clutch team wipe with the Bolt, I couldn't help but stare down at the pug-nosed little thing and just smile. Maybe it's the soppy British Fnatic fan in me, but the Bolt has a real personality to it, and that came across and won me over the more time I spent with it. Now obviously up till now it has been a bit of a whirlwind romance, but there was that one nagging thing that stopped me putting a ring on it and knocking boots with the Bolt, and that's the side buttons. They are well positioned for my grip and they're comparatively larger than competitor mice, but rather than use full or micro switches, the Bolt uses elevated micro dots. These are immediately noticeable and have been a divisive feature when used in other mice. Some people enjoy the limited pre and post travel that they do offer, whilst others, myself included, find their muted feel off-putting and quite distracting. I'd best describe it as pressing a button rather than clicking a switch. As I said, these buttons are perfectly functional and this could just be a taste thing, but if you are planning on buying the Bolt and you play games that use the side buttons frequently, make sure that you're happy with the feel of a micro dot switch before you purchase the mouse. Putting that preference aside, Fnatic have dropped a mouse that delivers flagship performance at mid-range price. If I'm honest, I can't really find anything specific that the Bolt has done wrong, just a couple of things that weren't to my taste, but that's not the fault of the mouse. But if you're someone who can look past these or know that they don't apply to you, then the flat-nosed little Bolt might be just the mouse that you're looking for. So, are any of you planning on picking up the Bolt? Have you checked out the Fnatic Focus 3 mousepad or the Streak 65 keyboard? Let me know in the comments, and as always, if it's not good enough, I'll keep you informed. So get subscribed, and I'll catch you in the next.